In the Gerald Ford Civic Center in Grand Rapids, Michigan, the air hummed with expectation as a live broadcast town hall prepared to unfold. Billed as Voices of Tomorrow, the event aimed to bridge the gap between Gen Z and Washington, pairing high-profile lawmakers with young speakers in a forum designed to spark raw, unscripted dialogue. The stage, lined with 4 politicians and a panel of youth leaders, was set for confrontation, not consensus. Cameras panned the auditorium, capturing the crowd's restless energy. Students, teachers, retirees, and political aides, all drawn by the promise of something real in an era of polished soundbites. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, a former public defender from Texas, sat third from the left, her sharp attire matched by an even sharper gaze. Known for her directness, she had built a reputation for refusing to play the political game by softening her edges. Her supporters admired her unapologetic truth-telling. Her critics called it divisive. Tonight, she was ready, her hands resting calmly on the table, her mind honed from years of courtroom battles where facts trumped posturing. She knew the forum's producers wanted sparks, and she was prepared to deliver, but on her terms. Barron Trump, just 18 and newly graduated, stepped into the spotlight as a controversial addition to the youth panel. His invitation, driven by the allure of his family name, guaranteed headlines. Fresh from conservative youth conferences and media rounds, he carried himself with the confidence of someone accustomed to deference. His team had prepped him. Speak strong, stay composed, land the punch. Whispered warnings from family insiders about the risks of a policy forum had been brushed off. Barron believed his name and preparation were enough to dominate the stage. The auditorium buzzed as the event began. Questions ranging from climate policy to criminal justice reform. Crockett fielded challenges with precision, citing contracts and civilian review boards when asked about police reform. Her answers grounded in specifics rather than applause lines. Barron, seated among the youth panel, scribbled notes, whispered to a handler, and glanced at the cameras, his posture signaling he had a plan. Elijah Moreno, a 19-year-old organizer from Fresno, leaned over to caution him during a break. "Ease up, let it flow." Barron waved him off, saying, "I got this," his confidence unshaken. Halfway through, Barron seized his moment. Standing at the microphone, he didn't ask a question, but delivered a speech aimed at Crockett. "Congresswoman, I've followed your legal work and public commentary," he said, his voice steady, laced with condescension. "It's hard to take people seriously when they use outrage as a career move." The room stilled, not with gasps, but a collective holding of breath. All eyes turned to Crockett, expecting a fiery retort. She didn't flinch, tilting her head slightly. She looked at him with the calm of someone who'd faced sharper barbs in tougher rooms. The stage was set for a clash not of volume, but of substance, one that would soon reveal the chasm between privilege and experience. The Gerald Ford Civic Center's auditorium crackled with tension as Barron Trump's words echoed through the silent crowd. His calculated jab at Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. "It's hard to take people seriously when they use outrage as a career move," hung in the air, a provocation designed for viral clips and conservative applause. The cameras tightened their focus, capturing Barron's slow blink and subtle smirk, his posture radiating the confidence of someone who believed he'd just scored a decisive point. The audience, a mix of students, retirees, and political aides, leaned forward, their anticipation palpable. They sensed a shift, an off-script moment that could redefine the carefully staged Voices of Tomorrow town hall. Jasmine Crockett sat unmoved, her sharp gaze fixed on Barron. Years in courtrooms facing dismissive prosecutors had taught her to read bravado, and she saw through his rehearsed delivery. She didn't reach for the microphone or lean back in defiance. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, a gesture that conveyed she'd heard this critique before. Never from someone so young, but always from those who mistook her passion for performance. The moderator, sensing the weight of the moment, nodded for her to respond, while Barron adjusted his jacket sleeve, mimicking a gesture he'd seen his father use countless times. "Mr. Trump," Jasmine began, her voice even deliberate, cutting through the room's expectant hush. "It's telling that the loudest voices criticizing my tone rarely have anything to say about the facts that made that tone necessary." The words landed not as a retort, but as an opening, precise and measured, inviting scrutiny of Barron's accusation. A murmur rippled through the crowd, not of agreement or dissent, but of recognition that this was no ordinary exchange. She didn't raise her voice or gesture wildly. Her hands rested calmly on the table, her authority rooted in restraint. She continued, her eyes locked on Barron's. "When I was a public defender, I represented girls who had no media team, no famous name, no safety net. One was 12, suspended for talking back to a teacher who mocked her dialect on tape. Outrage wasn't a career move, it was survival." The specificity disarmed the room. Barron's eyebrows dipped slightly, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face. He'd prepared for a political spar, not a lesson drawn from lived experience. "You call it outrage," Jasmine said. "I call it using the tools I have to defend those who have none. You, standing where you are, should ask why so many still need defending." Barron opened his mouth to respond. "I'm just saying." But Jasmine cut him off, her voice still calm but firm. "No, you're not just saying. You're performing. Unfortunately for you, I don't give standing ovations for weak scripts." The line landed like a surgical strike, sharp but not cruel, exposing the shallowness of his attack without resorting to theatrics. The audience didn't erupt, they sat stunned, absorbing the weight of her words. A single hum from the back broke the silence, a reflex to truth laid bare. Barron's confidence wavered, his fingers tapping the microphone as he searched for a comeback. The cameras captured every nuance. Jasmine's unflinching composure, Barron's subtle flinch, the crowd's rapt attention. Social media was already stirring, clips of the exchange spreading across X and TikTok, but the headlines missed the nuance. This wasn't a dunk or a takedown. It was a dismantling, not of Barron's person, but of his assumption that privilege could outmatch experience. Jasmine's restraint stung more than any shout, her intelligence wrapped in a calm that left no room for deflection. Barron, for the first time, looked less like a speaker and more like a student caught unprepared. The moderator hesitated, unsure whether to move on or let the moment breathe. Backstage, producers whispered into earpieces, aware they were running long but reluctant to cut away from a scene that felt like a confession. Barron's handler, seated behind him, leaned forward, but Barron waved him off again, determined to regain control. The other youth panelists, including Elijah Moreno, exchanged glances, sensing the dynamic had shifted. This was no longer a forum for soundbites. It was a stage where substance was being weighed, and Barron's rehearsed lines were coming up light. The auditorium of the Gerald Ford Civic Center in Grand Rapids pulsed with a quiet intensity as Jasmine Crockett's words reverberated. Her calm rebuke, "I don't give standing ovations for weak scripts," had stripped away Barron Trump's rehearsed bravado, leaving him exposed under the harsh lights of the Voices of Tomorrow Town Hall. The cameras, ever present, zoomed in on his face, capturing the subtle dip of his eyebrows, the faint tap of his fingers against the microphone, and the momentary pause as he processed the weight of her response. The audience, a diverse mix of students, retirees, and political aides, sat transfixed, sensing the exchange had transcended political theater. This was a clash of lived experience against untested confidence, and the scales were tipping. Barron, still standing at the microphone, tried to regain his footing. "I respect your position," he said, his voice stiffer now, "but I still think tone matters in public service." The words, meant to deflect, sounded hollow, a fallback to the script his team had drilled into him. He glanced at the moderator, expecting a segue, But Jasmine wasn't done. She leaned forward slightly, her hands still resting calmly on the table, her gaze unwavering. "You care about tone because you don't know what it feels like to need content," she said, her voice steady, each word a precise incision. The line landed like a thunderclap, not for its volume but for its truth, resonating with those in the crowd who'd felt dismissed for being too much. The room stilled again, the silence heavy with meaning. Jasmine's words weren't just a rebuttal. They were a lesson, rooted in years of fighting in courtrooms where tone was weaponized against her clients. Black girls labeled emotional, young boys deemed aggressive for daring to speak. She didn't shout or gesture wildly. Her restraint amplified her authority, a stark contrast to Barron's faltering posture. The cameras caught it all. Her composed intensity, his visible swallow, the crowd's rapt attention. Social media was already ablaze, clips of "You care about tone" spreading. But the viral snippets couldn't capture the deeper shift unfolding in the room. Jasmine pressed on, her voice gentle but unyielding. "You brought up tone, but tone didn't get me through law school while working night shifts. It didn't help me sit with parents who lost a child in a traffic stop. And it didn't keep me calm when a DA accused a teenage girl of acting grown because she wore lip gloss to court." Each example was a thread in a tapestry of experience Barron couldn't match. The audience leaned in, some nodding, others exchanging glances, recognizing stories that echoed their own struggles. Barron's earlier smirk was gone, replaced by a tentative stillness, as if he were waiting for permission to breathe. She turned her gaze to the crowd, addressing them directly. "We've reached a place where youth voices are invited, but only if they're agreeable, only if they smile and nod for crumbs. That's not dialogue, that's theater." A few students in the back shifted, their eyes wide, knowing she spoke to their own tightrope walk of being heard without being too loud. Then, facing Barron again, she said, "I want young people to challenge me, but don't come with scripted punches and expect me to flinch. Your last name doesn't fight for you." The line landed with surgical precision, not mocking his privilege, but exposing its limits in a room where substance outweighed status. Barron's response was hesitant, his voice lower. "I think I see your point," he said, the words caught between admission and retreat. It wasn't surrender, but it was a crack in the armor he'd worn so confidently minutes ago. The moderator, sensing the moment's weight, hesitated to move on, while backstage producers whispered urgently, aware the forum was running long but too gripped to cut away. Elijah Moreno, the youth organizer seated beside Barron, leaned back, his earlier warning, "Ease up," now vindicated. The other panelists, seasoned politicians, watched in silence, recognizing Jasmine's mastery in turning a personal attack into a universal lesson. The exchange had shifted the room's energy, from a scripted policy forum to a raw confrontation with truth. Jasmine's stories, of courtroom battles, grieving parents, and silenced children, weren't abstract. They were scars she carried, each one lending her words a gravity Barron's rehearsed lines couldn't match. The audience didn't applaud. They listened, their silence a testament to the power of authenticity over performance. As the moderator prepared to pivot to digital privacy laws, the weight of what had transpired lingered, a reminder that real leadership wasn't about winning the room, but about leaving it changed. The Gerald Ford Civic Center's auditorium in Grand Rapids was a crucible of raw energy, as the voices of tomorrow town hall veered into uncharted territory. Jasmine Crockett's measured words, "Your last name doesn't fight for you," had landed like a quiet detonation, exposing the limits of Barron Trump's privilege in a room where experience trumped pedigree. The cameras, relentless, captured Barron's subtle shift. His shoulders, once squared with confidence, now slightly hunched, his fingers no longer tapping the microphone, gripping it tightly. The audience, students, retirees, political aides, sat in rapt silence, their earlier anticipation replaced by a profound focus on the unfolding drama. This was no longer a policy forum. It was a public reckoning, and Jasmine held the stage with unshakable authority. Barron's hesitant response, "I think I see your point," hung in the air, a fragile attempt to regain footing on a stage that had slipped from his control. His eyes darted briefly to his handler, seated behind him, but no whispered advice could salvage the moment. The crowd sensed his uncertainty, their silence not judgmental but expectant, waiting to see if he would double down or retreat. Jasmine, her hands still calmly folded on the table, didn't gloat or press for surrender. Instead, she leaned forward slightly, her gaze softening but not relenting, and spoke directly to him, her voice a blend of challenge and mentorship. "You don't have to agree with me, Barron, but if you're going to be here, really here, bring something real, not rehearsed." The words were a lifeline, not a lash, offering him a chance to step beyond performance into genuine dialogue. But they also raised the stakes, demanding he confront the gap between his scripted bravado and her lived truth. The cameras zoomed in, capturing the faint tremor in Barron's jaw, the way his eyes flickered as he processed her invitation. The moderator, caught off guard by the exchange's intensity, fumbled for control, while backstage producers whispered urgently, aware that cutting to a commercial break would shatter a moment too real for television's usual gloss. Social media was already exploding, clips of Jasmine's lines, "Bring something real, and you care about tone," spreading like wildfire. But the room's energy was deeper, more human than any viral snippet could convey. Jasmine turned to the broader audience, her voice steady but resonant. "This isn't just about one exchange. We're in a place where young voices are invited, but only if they play nice, only if they don't disrupt the script. That's not leadership, it's theater." Her words struck a chord, especially with the students in the back, who nodded subtly, recognizing the pressure to be palatable to be heard. Then, facing Barron again, she delivered a line that would echo beyond the auditorium. "You came here with a strategy, thinking if you provoked me, I'd prove your point. But discipline means holding fire without burning the building down." The audience exhaled, a collective release of tension, as her words reframed the confrontation as a lesson in restraint and purpose. Barron swallowed visibly, his earlier smirk a distant memory. He opened his mouth to respond but hesitated, his voice catching. "I didn't mean disrespect," he said finally, quieter now, the words less rehearsed, more human. "I thought I was prepared." The admission, small but significant, marked a shift. For the first time, he wasn't performing. He was processing, standing at the edge of a realization that confidence without substance was a fragile shield. Jasmine nodded, not smugly but with a knowing calm. "Then take that and grow," she said, her tone softening just enough to signal she saw his effort. "The mic doesn't make you right. Listening might." The line landed with quiet power, a call to accountability that resonated with everyone in the room. The other youth panelists, including Elijah Moreno, who'd warned Barron to ease up, sat in silence, their expressions a mix of awe and respect. The politicians on the panel, accustomed to dodging tough questions, watched Jasmine with a mix of admiration and unease, knowing she'd turned a personal attack into a universal truth. The moderator, sensing the need to move on, tried to pivot to digital privacy laws, but the room's energy refused to reset. The exchange had cracked open something raw, a glimpse of what dialogue could be when rooted in authenticity rather than posturing. Barron sat differently now, his posture less rigid, his eyes occasionally flicking to Jasmine, not with defiance but with curiosity. The crowd, too, was changed. Less a collection of spectators, more a community witnessing a rare moment of growth in real time. As the forum continued, the weight of what had passed lingered, a reminder that leadership wasn't about landing punches, but about leaving the room wiser than when you entered. The Gerald Ford Civic Center in Grand Rapids was electric with unspoken energy, as the voices of Tomorrow Town Hall reached a pivotal moment. Jasmine Crockett's call to Barron Trump. "The mic doesn't make you right. Listening might," had transformed their exchange from a verbal spar into a profound lesson in accountability. The auditorium, filled with students, retirees, and political aides, held a collective breath, their attention riveted on the stage. The cameras, unyielding, captured Barron's subtle transformation. His rigid posture softened, his eyes no longer darting to his handler, but resting on Jasmine with a mix of caution and curiosity. What had begun as his attempt to score a viral jab had become a public reckoning. Not of defeat but of growth, and the room felt it. Barron, still gripping the microphone, stood at a crossroads. His earlier confidence, fueled by a famous name and rehearsed lines, had crumbled under Jasmine's calm, experience-driven authority. Her invitation to take that and grow hung in the air, a challenge to step beyond performance into something real. The crowd watched, not for a knockout, but for what he'd do next. The moderator, sensing the moment's weight, hesitated to interrupt, while backstage producers whispered frantically, aware that cutting away would rob the broadcast of its raw humanity. Social media was ablaze with clips of Jasmine's lines. Discipline means holding fire and brings something real, spreading, but the room's deeper truth was in the silence between words. Jasmine, her hands folded calmly, didn't press for a response. Her restraint, honed in courtrooms where every gesture mattered, amplified her presence. She'd laid bare the chasm between Barron's privilege and her hard-earned wisdom, not to humiliate but to teach. Now, she waited, giving him space to choose his path. Barron cleared his throat, his voice lower, less polished. "I didn't mean disrespect," he repeated, then paused, as if weighing his next words. "I came here trying to sound smart, but maybe I should have asked better questions." The admission, halting but honest, was a seismic shift. For the first time, he wasn't hiding behind a script. He was speaking from a place of discomfort, and the room felt the authenticity. The audience didn't applaud. Applause would have cheapened it. Instead, they leaned forward, their silence a nod to a rare moment of vulnerability on a stage built for posturing. Elijah Moreno, the youth organizer beside Barron, gave a subtle nod, his earlier warning vindicated. The other panelists, seasoned politicians, watched with a mix of surprise and respect, recognizing Jasmine's ability to turn a confrontation into a classroom. The cameras zoomed in on Barron's face, catching the faint dip of his shoulders, the way his eyes flickered with something new. Not defiance, but reflection. Jasmine's response was measured, her tone softening but still firm. "That's a start," she said, her gaze steady. "Leadership isn't about sounding smart. It's about asking what you'd risk your platform for. If the answer's nothing, you're not ready." The words weren't just for Barron. They were for every young person in the room, a challenge to prioritize substance over spotlight. She turned to the crowd, her voice carrying a quiet urgency. "I say this to all of you. Don't waste your voice trying to sound important. Use it to say something that matters." A few students in the back exchanged glances, their notebooks open, pens paused as her words sank in. The moderator, finally regaining control, asked Barron if he'd like to respond further. He hesitated, then spoke slowly, his voice raw. "I think I missed something," he said, looking at Jasmine. "I see that now." The words, simple but heavy, marked the climax of the exchange. A public acknowledgement of his misstep, not as a loss but as a lesson. The room exhaled, the tension easing into something warmer, more human. Social media erupted, not with memes but with praise for the exchange's nuance. Jasmine's surgical precision, Barron's willingness to stay and listen. Clips of "I missed something" trended alongside her earlier lines, a testament to a moment that defied partisan sniping. Jasmine didn't gloat. She folded her hands, her expression calm, and waited for the next question. But the room had changed. The energy wasn't neutral. It was alive, charged with the possibility of dialogue that could bridge divides. Barron sat differently, his posture less defensive, his eyes occasionally flicking to Jasmine, not with resentment, but with a dawning respect. The crowd, too, was transformed, their silence now a shared commitment to witnessing something rare. Not a takedown, but a turning point where growth outshone ego. As the forum shifted to other topics, the weight of this moment lingered, a beacon of what leadership could be when rooted in truth and openness. The Gerald Ford Civic Center in Grand Rapids buzzed with a quiet reverence as the Voices of Tomorrow Town Hall moved past its climactic moment. Jasmine Crockett's mentorship and Barron Trump's raw admission, "I think I missed something," had reshaped the auditorium's atmosphere, turning a scripted policy forum into a rare display of human growth. The cameras, still rolling, captured the subtle shifts. Barron's softened posture, his eyes no longer avoiding Jasmine's. Jasmine's calm composure, her hands folded, her presence a steady anchor. The audience, students, retirees, political aides, sat in a shared silence, not of judgment but of reflection, as if collectively processing a truth too profound for applause. The moment had transcended politics, becoming a lesson in listening, and its impact was already spilling beyond the stage. The moderator, regaining composure, steered the discussion toward digital privacy laws, but the room's energy remained tethered to the exchange. Other panelists offered measured responses, but their words felt secondary, overshadowed by the weight of what had passed. Elijah Moreno, the youth organizer beside Barron, leaned back, his expression one of quiet respect for Jasmine's mastery and Barron's unexpected humility. Backstage, producers whispered into earpieces, torn between the broadcast schedule and the urge to let the moment breathe. Social media was a firestorm, with clips of "I Miss Something" and "The Mic Doesn't Make You Right" trending on X and TikTok, not as partisan ammunition, but as a beacon of dialogue done differently. Jasmine, ever disciplined, didn't linger on the victory. When prompted to elaborate, she shifted focus to her record, her voice steady and deliberate. "I wasn't born with a platform," she said, addressing the crowd. "I spent 12 years representing people no one wanted to hear. Kids like Marcus Bellamy, an 8th grader charged for pushing back when a school officer grabbed his backpack. Inside was a notebook with Sonic the Hedgehog doodles, but the system labeled him aggressive. The story, vivid and human, grounded her authority in experience, not ego. You want to talk outrage? I'd love to see you whisper through that." The audience nodded, some jotting notes, others exchanging glances, recognizing the stakes of her work. Barron listened, his earlier defensiveness gone. His silence wasn't defeat but absorption, a young man grappling with the weight of stories he'd never had to carry. The cameras caught his subtle nod, a private acknowledgement not meant for the crowd but for himself. The exchange had cracked open something universal, the power of staying present, of choosing to hear over being heard. As the forum wound down, the moderator thanked the panel, and the credits rolled, but the real story was just beginning outside the auditorium's walls. Within hours, the internet transformed the moment into a cultural touchstone. Clips circulated, not just the punchy lines but the pauses, the shifts in Barron's expression, Jasmine's unwavering calm. Posts praised the nuance. "Crockett didn't dunk, she taught," one user wrote. Barron could have stormed off but stayed. That's rare. TikTok videos dissected the exchange, with creators marveling at Jasmine's restraint and Barron's willingness to listen. By morning, Jasmine's office was flooded with emails, not from press, but from teachers, students, and parents who saw themselves in her stories of fighting for the unheard. "I'm a single mom," one wrote. "Your voice reminds me why I keep going." Barron trended too, not just in memes, but in unexpected respect. His late-night video, posted from his phone, went viral for its simplicity. "Last night, I tried to make a point and got taught a better one," he said, looking into the lens. "You don't have to agree to learn. Thank you, Congresswoman Crockett." The clip, devoid of polish, humanized him, earning nods even from critics. Jasmine's team responded with a statement. Public spaces work best when we listen. Last night showed what that can look like. Behind the scenes, their staffs exchanged emails, exploring a youth-led roundtable in Dallas. A quiet move to build on the moment away from cameras. The ripples spread further. Sunday morning shows replayed the exchange, framing it as a generational dialogue, not a clash. High school teachers assigned it as a discussion prompt. College debate coaches called it a masterclass in respectful accountability. The moment's power lay not in its volume but in its humanity. Two people, worlds apart, finding common ground in discomfort. As Grand Rapids settled into the night, the town hall's legacy was clear. It hadn't solved divides, but it had planted a seed, a reminder that leadership begins not with winning, but with listening, and that truth, spoken with purpose, could change the room and beyond. The Gerald Ford Civic Center in Grand Rapids, Michigan, had quieted as the Voices of Tomorrow Town Hall concluded. But the exchange between Jasmine Crockett and Barron Trump lingered like a spark that refused to fade. Jasmine's calm authority. The mic doesn't make you right, listening might, and Barron's raw admission. I miss something, had transformed a scripted forum into a beacon of authentic dialogue. As the audience dispersed into the cool night, their murmurs carried a shared awe, not for a political victory, but for a rare glimpse of growth in real time. The cameras had stopped rolling, but the moment's impact was just beginning to reshape conversations far beyond the auditorium, leaving a legacy that would echo through classrooms, newsrooms, and living rooms across the nation. Jasmine Crockett, stepping off the stage, carried herself with the same composure that had defined her response. Her stories, of Marcus Bellamy's sonic doodles, of black girls silenced in courtrooms, hadn't just disarmed Barron, they'd reminded everyone why she fought. Her inbox overflowed with messages from strangers. A Dallas teacher using her words to inspire students, a mother who saw her own struggles in Jasmine's resolve. She didn't seek the spotlight, but it found her, with Sunday shows replaying the exchange as a model of principled leadership. Her team's statement, "Public spaces work best when we listen," became a quiet manifesto, and plans for a Dallas Youth Roundtable signaled her commitment to building on the moment, not basking in it. Barron Trump, meanwhile, left the stage a changed figure. His viral phone video, "I got taught a better point," wasn't a polished PR move, but a young man grappling with humility. The internet, often cruel, offered surprising respect. He could have walked off, but he stayed, one ex-user noted. Memes faded, replaced by discussions of his willingness to listen, a rarity in a world of doubling down. His nod to Jasmine, private yet captured, became a symbol of what privilege could learn when confronted with truth. Behind closed doors, he considered the Dallas Roundtable, a step toward engaging beyond the spotlight, guided by a lesson he hadn't expected. The town hall's ripples reshaped public discourse. High school civics classes assigned the clip, prompting debates about authenticity versus performance. College debate coaches hailed Jasmine's surgical restraint, while students analyzed Barron's pause as a case study in growth. Advocacy groups cited the exchange to push for policy forums that prioritized lived experience over posturing. News outlets, from CNN to local papers, framed it as a generational bridge, not a clash, with headlines like, "When listening outshone winning." Social media, especially TikTok, kept the moment alive, with creators stitching Jasmine's lines into calls for accountability, while #ListenToLearn trended alongside. The mic doesn't make you right. The moment's deeper significance lay in its challenge to a polarized world. Jasmine's refusal to shout, her grounding in courtroom scars, showed that strength didn't need volume, only truth. Barron's choice to stay to say, "I missed something," proved that courage could mean admitting fault, even under scrutiny. Together, they offered a blueprint. Dialogue rooted in discomfort could plant seeds of change. Educators used the exchange to teach critical thinking, urging students to ask, What would you risk your platform for? Community organizers in Grand Rapids planned follow-up forums, inspired to foster spaces where youth voices weren't just heard but heeded. As weeks passed, the town hall became a touchstone, referenced in academic papers on political communication and documentaries about civic engagement. Its legacy wasn't in solving systemic divides, but in showing what was possible when two people, one with lived experience, one still forming his, met in a moment of truth. Jasmine's mentorship, Barron's listening, and the audience's silence became a shared narrative, a reminder that leadership wasn't about dominating, but about leaving the room wiser. The Grand Rapids night didn't end politics as usual. It offered a glimpse of politics as it could be, where listening was the loudest act of all. For those who watched, the takeaway was personal. When had they last paused to hear, not just to reply? The question lingered, a challenge to carry forward. Jasmine and Barron, unlikely partners in a fleeting moment, had shown that growth lived in the pause between certainty and humility. As America grappled with its divides, their exchange stood as a quiet revolution, proving that a single conversation, rooted in truth and openness, could shift perspectives and plant hope for a dialogue that dared to listen.